Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Queensland. Well, today is a historic day. Today our government has listened to the hundreds, if not thousands, of voices of people right throughout our state that want us to do more and act in relation to coercive control. Unfortunately, coercive control is real, it's happening in our community, and many women are subjected to daily intimidation, control of their bank accounts, control of where they go and control of their movements. This has to end. Margaret McMurdo was commissioned to do a comprehensive report where over 700 submissions were received. It is worth a read. The voices of women are right throughout, and the voices of women are listened to, but they are just a snapshot of what is happening across our state. So the Attorney-General and I have looked very carefully and we responded to the recommendations, and today we announce a huge injection of funding to address the issues of systemic processes that we are seeing in our court system, in our police processes. Over $360 million will be committed. This is a very significant step. We've already built on the Quentin Bryce Not Now, Not Ever report. That was something that when we first came to office, we acted quickly on. But we know there was always more to do. We need more co-responder models between police and our domestic and family violence services out there. We need more education so the community understands what coercive control is, so they can identify the signs and they can take action. As part of this, we've also committed to conducting a commission of inquiry into the police responses, and the Attorney-General and I will have more to say about that tomorrow. We'll be releasing tomorrow the terms of reference and the person who will be conducting that inquiry. But this is far-reaching. It is historic, and it is once again Queensland leading the way. Can I also thank a number of families came into Parliament House today, and once again they share their stories with not just us but with Queenslanders. And every time they retell that story, I know how much it impacts on them emotionally. And I want each and every one of those families to know too that we care about them, we listen to them, and we thank them for their continual work that they do in this very important area of curbing domestic and family violence. They have lost loved ones. Every single person and children are valued in our state, and hopefully the amount of money that we're putting into this will go a long way. And I'm very proud that our government has listened, and I'm very proud that our government has acted. I'll hand over to the Attorney-General. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Premier, and I am incredibly proud to stand with you today to announce this historic package of reform that will mean that our criminal justice system is trauma-informed and places victim survivors at the centre. To all of those women who have shared their stories, our message to you today is that we have heard you, we have listened to you, and now we are taking further action. Implementing each and every one of the task force recommendations will ensure that our laws, our systems, our practices are really geared towards supporting and keeping women and girls safe and holding perpetrators to account. And it's not just about new laws. It's about expanding specialist domestic and family violence courts. It's about investing in co-responder models so that women can get very important advice from a DV service at the same time that there is a police response. It's about further investment in our high-risk teams, a huge investment in perpetrator men's behavioural change programs to hold those perpetrators to account. And most importantly, making sure that every young person in Queensland gets access to respectful relationships. That's how we prevent this violence from happening in the first place. We will be legislating to make coercive control a crime. We know that non-physical forms of violence can be just as dangerous as physical violence. And for the 700 women that made a submission and told us about that continuing pattern of abuse, we hear you and we will be making coercive control a crime. Before we do that, however, as the task force has recommended, we need to educate the community about what coercive control is. We need to train our first responders. We need the system to be ready, because currently the system responds to single acts of physical violence. But we know what women experience in a controlling relationship is a pattern of abuse over time. So our system has to be ready if we want these laws to be effective. And as the Premier has also announced, we will be establishing a commission of inquiry into how police handle domestic violence matters. This is absolutely not about blaming our police. The task force was clear. Each and every day, they are saving the lives of Queensland women and girls. But we want to make sure that every woman, no matter where she is in this great state, gets a very good response and has her matters heard and listened to, and that's what the Commission of Inquiry will be about.
I mean, I know we're going to get terms of reference tomorrow, but what exactly will the Royal Commission look at? Is it the culture? Is it the whole system? Is it the police service? How complaints are received? How they're dealt with on a day-to-day basis?
Probably a combination of most of those things you just mentioned, Lane, but we're going to leave that till tomorrow. I'll be releasing them publicly. But what we have seen is that unfortunately, some women have fallen through the cracks, and we want to do everything we can to prevent that from happening. There are hundreds of new recruits coming through the police service, and we acknowledge that they are responding to more and more domestic and family violence call-outs than ever before. So we need to make sure that if there are examples of where things can be done better, that we can improve the systems and the response.
Premier, the Police Commissioner said when this the report was first released, that she didn't think a commission of inquiry was necessary. Can you talk to what convinced you that it is necessary?
Well, it's a recommendation that has come out of here. It's been given some very careful consideration, and that's why it's going ahead.
Premier, that report was fairly clear that the inquiry was designed to look at widespread cultural issues within the police force. The language that's been used here seems to be kind of suggesting that that's going to look at processes and responses. I mean, we've looked at processes and responses for a decade, yet there's never, until the McMurdo report, been an acknowledgement that there are cultural issues at heart. Can you, I guess, assure us that the inquiry is going to ultimately look at those cultural issues?
I think we'll wait till tomorrow. We'll actually have more to say about that. But look, where we can do better, we will. And I just think we have, like I said, that the police are doing a great job out there on a day-to-day basis. But some of the models that we're looking at here are where the police and the domestic and family violence services are actually working in tandem, going out together, where we can do more collaboration, where we can have more co-responder models, working in, areas of high risk. I think this is a good thing.
Again, that's a process problem, isn't it? It's not a cultural problem, which this report really was pretty clear about the need to address.
Yep, but we'll be talking more about the terms of reference tomorrow.
Attorney General, in terms of when these laws are brought into effect next year, how difficult will it be to actually result in a conviction once someone is charged with the coercive control?
Well, that's why we're taking our time to get this right. We could introduce laws tomorrow, but if they're not going to keep women safe and, more importantly, get convictions, that's why the task force has recommended that we invest significantly in community education and awareness so that women themselves understand that they may be trapped in a controlling, abusive relationship, so that friends and family around women can have these important conversations if they're seeing concerning red flags in a relationship. And it's why we have to take the time to train our first responders, our police, in how to collate this evidence. And it's why we also need to do training, for our prosecutors, legal aid lawyers, everyone in the system, needs to actually understand this pattern of abusive behaviour over time, and it is different to what the system now is set to respond to. So I'm very confident that the task force have set us a very detailed 4-phase approach to make sure this is successful. And they have looked at other jurisdictions in the world. There's only a few of them that have criminalised coercive control, but we have the benefit of having looked at how successful those jurisdictions have been in getting convictions and holding perpetrators to account. And I think criminalising this behaviour is the strongest message that we can send, that it is violence and it is absolutely unacceptable.
If a bill is going to be before Parliament at the end of next year, when will these laws actually come into effect? What is that timeline?
So obviously we want to get this right. There is a lot of consultation to do before we introduce those laws, but the task force recommended timetable has us introducing that bill before the end of next year so they can take effect the following year.
Do you have a breakdown on exactly how the 360 million will be spent?
Absolutely we do. Very happy to get you a detailed breakdown, but significant investment in perpetrator programs, over $100 million in keeping women safe at our specialist courts and our courthouses. More money for specialist courts, more money for co-responder models, huge investment in high-risk teams, which is that information sharing between all agencies and services. And the task force very clearly said that where you can have those co-responder models and share information, it's already getting results. So further investment is much needed in those models.
Do you have any more detail at this stage on the, I think it was called the special strategy in the release about dealing with the possible implications of this in First Nations communities?
Absolutely. So there's a $9 million commitment for a strategy to be co-designed with our First Nations community, but also I think, for the justice system to have in the Department of Justice and Attorney General a Chief First Nations Justice Officer, someone very senior who can oversee this work. The task force very clearly said we don't want to see unintended consequences of people being criminalised who are not perpetrators. We want to make sure we get this right, and our First Nations community, through the submissions, were very clear that we need a dedicated strategy for them, and we've accepted that.
Can you tell us how the co-responder model is going to work? Are we going to have support workers embedded in police stations? Are we going to have police embedded in NGOs? How's that going to work in practice?
So there's a significant investment of $23 million to pilot a range of co-responder models. So we want to make sure we get evidence-based about what works best. So at the moment we have some really great models of domestic violence workers being embedded in police stations. We have police and DV workers who go out to incidents together. We are going to be trialling all of it, evaluating it, and make sure that we get the very best evidence, and it's all about keeping women safe at that very important time when they reach out for help and make that decision to leave.
Police have indicated they're open to a model, or previously indicated they were open to a model where you might have a specialist police station for domestic and family violence victims. Is that something you might look at?
That was not something that the task force has recommended. However, they have said very clearly any model where there is strong information sharing in co-responder model we should look at. So, we're very happy to keep having those discussions, but today we are implementing all of the 89 recommendations from the task force. That includes significant investment. This is historic investment for high-risk teams, information sharing and co-responder models.
Will there be public hearings for the Commission of Inquiry, or will it be behind closed doors?
That's a matter for the reviewer, and as the Premier said, we'll have more to say about that, including the terms of reference tomorrow.
There are also a couple of high-profile inquests that are still live at the moment where the coroner is essentially considering evidence. Is it possible that this strategy could be added to, changed once you have coronial recommendations from those two inquests?
Absolutely. We take coronial recommendations very seriously, and we are very happy to continue to implement coronial recommendations through this strategy. But very, very clearly, the task force has heard from over 700 women and their lived experience, and that is what is informing our strategy going forward. But of course, we have in place in Queensland a DV Death Review Board, we have coronial inquests. We will always look at those recommendations if we can further strengthen the system.
There's been issues with victims incorrectly being identified as the perpetrator. What in this will go to that problem, solving that problem?
There's a number of recommendations in the task force report about making sure that we are correctly identifying the person most in need of protection. That includes, in the first phase of legislative changes, which will be this year, strengthening the Domestic Violence Protection Act to, more strongly make sure that our magistrates and our system are only identifying that one person in need of protection. So cross orders are becoming increasingly common, and that's often how particularly women or First Nations people end up in the system. So there are some key recommendations in here that we have accepted to make sure that we are not having unintended consequences of people being brought into the system and criminalised when they are in fact the victim.
I realise we're going to get more detail tomorrow, but can you tell us whether you've spoken with the QPS and the police union who are both opposed to an inquiry in the first instance?
They have been consulted and we will continue to work with them. We can't do this without our police officers. As I said, the task force was very clear, particularly encouraging about the leadership of the Queensland Police and their dedication to eliminating domestic and family violence and supporting women. So we'll continue to work with them and consult them on the terms of reference and the inquiry. Thank you.
Thanks.